Hello, my name is Rick Rasmussen, and I'm here with my colleague and friend Javier Sevilla to talk about open innovation and corporate transformation, specifically on how it relates to you and the automotive industry. So, a couple of questions. How can you leverage outside resources outside your company, to innovate within your company? How do you do that? How do you find resources? What are best practices? And then, secondarily, what is your innovation focus? What's your innovation strategy? Why should you innovate? How is it going to work? And what's going to be the result? So, as we get started, I'd like to begin with a definition, and that is to describe what is open innovation. And the easiest way to do that is to compare and contrast it to closed innovation. Closed innovation is the way that which companies have moved forward on developing their own capabilities through a research lab, hiring students right out of college, PhDs, thought leaders, researchers, to go ahead and develop some capability. That capability was then deemed to be commercializable, to have some potential in the open marketplace, put through a development process, and eventually brought to market. Limited in scope and aimed toward the specific direction of the overall company. We saw this historically in the start of the century, through all the way throughout the 50s and 60s, even the 70s, with companies such as IBM and Xerox in their labs, Ford Motor Company and GM and others in the automotive space, AT&T, Bell Labs being one of the most famous instances, and so on. But frankly, while it was productive in its time, that capability has now moved on. And most corporations now, almost without exception, are practicing some form of open innovation. And open innovation is best described as now breaking down the barriers so that companies can use resources outside of their own boundaries in order to go ahead and provide innovative and new products and capabilities to the marketplace. Let's take a look here at the bottom row. So companies can take a look at new technologies, new ideas, and license those in. You can do collaborations with universities and other academic institutions. You can start to form formalized joint ventures. You can do line extensions, in other words, increase your product line breadth and depth through partners. You can license technologies inside. And lastly, if you have some capabilities that may not be interesting to you, but they were developed internally, there's always the ability to spin out, spin off, out license, and develop other revenue sources. So if we take that into some more of a formalized drawing, there's this idea of closed innovation being a closed funnel and people taking capabilities and aiming at current markets, but new markets and other firms' markets were often outside your reach. Open innovation looks like a leaky funnel. It is not the closed boundaries, but now allows items, capabilities to be brought inside and outside the organization itself. So, traditionally, your internal technology aimed at your current market. If you had some technology that was interesting to outsiders, potentially take that, license it outside to other firms' market, license, spin out, divest. If you needed core technology, you could work with universities, other firms, and bring that in for both your current market as well as new markets. You could insource external technology. That is not just technology based, but actually products, services, things are a little bit farther along in the development food chain for new markets. And also pretty interesting, you can start to think about developing your internal technology base as more of a process to evaluate what it is you have and take a look and see whether that might be applicable for even newer markets. Each one of these is interesting in and of its own right, and each of those is explained in some depth in a series of books put out by Henry Chesbrough out of UC Berkeley. So Henry Chesbrough is the father of the open innovation concept, and he started off with this funnel, which is pretty ugly, but it amuses me somewhat. But it actually does a pretty good job in explaining internal and external technology bases, technology insourcing, provides capabilities to service your current market, new market, and potentially license to other firms' markets. And it's explained well in this series of books. So I highly encourage you, particularly the first one, Open Innovation, which sets the basis, the vocabulary, and everything that we're going to talk about in general form. Okay, interesting, academic, but in practical terms, what that means is that going from closed innovation and the old way of doing things means that companies now have access to additional resources. They're becoming more reactive, and the average lifespan of companies is decreasing. So decreasing significantly from somewhere between 60 and 70 years in the 50s and 60s down to less than 20 years today. In addition, half of the existing S&P 500 companies have disappeared in the last 20 years. So what was a traditional, long-form, potentially family-style business focused on a specific market, dominating those markets, the life cycle is eroding because of innovation, the rapid pace at which new cycles are coming along and new technologies are being adopted. So there's a phrase that says innovate or die, and you can see that through now less than 25 years, companies are starting to last 10 years, 5 years, and even faster than that. A good example of that is where I'm from. So I was born and raised in Silicon Valley. I'm giving you this talk today from the heart of Silicon Valley. And I'm surrounded by corporations, many of which are represented here, and those that I grew up with some 20 plus years ago. So leaders of Silicon Valley, and these are certainly household names in many cases, have been around, but innovate or die, they've been slowly dying off as other incumbents have taken over their markets, markets have shifted, they haven't necessarily moved along with the times. So it's said that in 10 years' time, it's predicted that 40% of the companies that you know and love, the Fortune 500 companies today, will just simply no longer exist. Disruptive technology, exponential organizations, explosive growth, and innovate or die are some of the key phrases that are being used here every day. Now let's apply those, not in general, but to the automotive industry specifically. What are some of the shifts? What are the industry shifts that are happening in the automotive industry? And it's not just one, it's many. But if one were to point to that one primary one, it's the introduction of Tesla as a market force. And certainly Tesla brought EVs into the mainstream, but also automobiles as a software platform. And it's really just a software, computer on wheels. The ability to update, the ability to put in new capabilities on the fly. Also autonomous driving and what that brings and the changes it's going to bring to all industries across the board. So is Tesla the iPhone of electric vehicles or just another car company? It remains to be seen. But at this point, they've just exceeded $1 trillion market cap, which happened over the last few days. That's extraordinary for a company that has a very small fraction of revenues when compared to $1 trillion market cap. So the challenge has been thrown. How is General Motors going to overtake Tesla for the electric car crown? Well, everybody's scrambling. In this case, the Detroit car maker aims to sell 1 million electric vehicles, up from basically a standing start by 2025. New entrants are coming in. Rivian is shooting for an $80 billion valuation in its IPO. How do they become the new Tesla? And so Tesla has set itself up, but continues to progress. Apple is entering in. Apple is a classic software company combined with compute level hardware. I'm shooting this on an Apple computer now, but how will they adapt to the changes in the car market and the opportunities that provides? Certainly they provide some infotainment capability with CarPlay, but they've got an R&D project that's been well underway for several years, and who knows what might come out of that. And then finally, you can't talk about innovation in the car space without mentioning flying cars. We've all heard about flying cars from the days back in the Jetsons and so on, since the 50s and 60s, but they're closer and closer to becoming a reality. So draw a big circle around that. Cars, flying cars, EVs, what's going on with EV use, scooters, and so on. So the mobility space at large is diverse and ever-changing. Now, when explaining things that are happening out there in the world, I prefer to take a look at the perspectives starting with a framework. So this is one of my favorite frameworks for innovation, and it talks about the three horizons of core, growth, and explore. Let's step through them just to give you the vocabulary, because this will be important as you start to set your innovation strategy. So, core, horizon, also known as Horizon 1. This is your business today. This is what you're doing for the bulk, the vast majority of your revenues, your profits, where your engineers are focused, your production lines are focused. You're doing some sort of a core product or service that is who identifies you. There are opportunities, of course, to innovate within your core product line. There's supply chain improvement, there's incremental product improvements, there's ways to get greater customer satisfaction, there's individual changes to product lines for next generation and so on. So that continues and should continue to be the focus of your core innovation. Brand innovation, services innovation, there's a lot of different things. In fact, there are a lot of books. If you take a look at innovation, it's a broad set of challenges that companies go through. Not enough. So your core business is going through a product life cycle. It is growing or maybe reaching its point of maturity, at which point you need to start to take a look at new opportunities. Horizon 2. Horizon 2, sometimes called adjacent innovation, adjacent meaning next to, or growth, the growth innovation potential, growing your business. So this is often considered to be taking your existing products and moving new products or services to your existing customers. New products and services to existing customers. Do the flip side of that, it's also considered your existing products and services to new customers, expanding your market to places where you haven't necessarily sold before. Might be new geographies, might be new demographics, whatever it is that allows you to do that. Adjacent innovation is interesting because you keep one foot on the ground. You don't overturn everything that you're doing, but you have your customer base and you're supplying some new capabilities, or you have your products and services and you're providing them to new customers. Horizon 2, growth. Horizon 3, transformational, exploration, moonshots, all these things that people love to talk about, which is the brand new distant horizon of something, the bold new frontier of something that you haven't necessarily done before, but might end up being the future of the company. So, and this is the thing that Silicon Valley venture capitalists love to invest in, is the brand new things. So Horizon 1, Horizon 2, Horizon 3, core, growth, and explore. Let's break that open a little bit further. So executing your core mission, we can do that. There's this tool known as the Business Model Canvas. You may have heard of it. Business Model Canvas. It serves like a dashboard. How you create value, what it costs you, and how you realize value by selling to your customers. You can map that out on what you can do and take a look at some process innovation and other things that go on. partially known, meaning that you have existing customers and or you have existing products or services. You're looking to extend your core business and provide growth to the company. And then this whole idea of a new, disruptive business model change, something radically different, Horizon 3, explore. Low risk, moderate risk, high risk. So there's this golden ratio of R&D investment that's talked about. It started here, Silicon Valley has moved on. It's a generally adopted standard for R&D budgets worldwide. So if your corporation has an R&D budget, research and development, allocated as a function of percentage of revenue or in line with industry standards, you take that budget and allocate it most properly across these three horizons. So Horizon 1 gets the bulk of the R&D budget. It's where your profits are coming from. You can go ahead and invest here. You can realize short-term benefit, but it may not be the highest return. We'll talk about returns in a second. But the bulk of the budget typically should go to core, according to the golden ratio. Adjacent innovation, growth opportunities, 20% of your overall R&D budget. You can go there. Low risk, reasonably low risk, because again, you're dealing with some knowns. You're dealing with known customers and or known products or services. And then the unknown, the crazy talk, the moonshots, the big things. 10% of your budget, because this may end up being the future of the company as markets shift, innovate or die. So it's called the golden ratio because if you allocate across the board, you'll see particular returns in line. And what companies often do is if they may have a shift in the market, signals don't look so good, there's maybe a bad quarter or two, one of the first reactions is to retract the R&D budget, to reduce it dramatically. And our premise is do not do that by getting rid of the Horizon 3 innovations. To continue, even at a downturn, this golden ratio of 70-20-10, so that you don't kill off those things that may portend your future. In doing so, you may just simply cut yourself off too short. Okay, golden ratio. Now, what are the returns here? If you invest 70%, 20, and 10, what would you expect to see? It turns out to be the exact opposite. So ROI, return on investment, is in the short term. Typically for an investment in your core business, maybe 10%, 15%, depending on industry norms. Higher for growth opportunities. These are adjacent innovations. You're moving into new markets, maybe not as crowded as your existing markets. Competition may not be as heavy. You can partially select those, and off we go. 20% returns or even higher. The moonshots often see large returns. You're moving into brand new markets, brand new areas that other people haven't seen, and you can be the only supplier in that area for a while or hold monopolistic rents. So 10%, 20%, 70%. This bears out, the example that I like to use is Amazon because it's simple to understand. Core product line, thinking back, it's what they've been known for historically. Amazon started off as an online reseller of books. So they disrupted the entire publishing, book retail industry by providing a much wider selection than a bookstore could do. Overall, reasonable prices, ability to get those at your house or remote locations and so on. So core capability for Amazon selling books. Growth, adjacent innovation. Think about that. What would Amazon have as an adjacent opportunity, adjacent innovation beyond books? Two things. New products or services. And so they've continued to expand beyond just simple books. They took books, moved them online. You can buy Kindles. You can the book selections improved and so on. So core has happened. But beyond books, it's been household supplies, gardening, power tools, music, movies, prime Prime Video, other things that are partially known that deal with existing customer base, new products and services. The other thing they've done is to take their core business, books and now other things, and move those to new customers. So we've continued to see international expansion, which is also innovation. So moves into Canada, Mexico, Latin America, Europe, and other places. Each move is innovating because you're dealing with language barriers, customs, shipping, warehousing, personal tastes of the area, so on. So that's innovation as well. Not extremely hard. It's logical innovation, but it takes work. Number 3, what would you think? Most people say the cloud. Amazon Web Services, not the same customer base, not consumers, not the same product line. Now they're dealing with large business, small, medium, large businesses, and delivering compute resources, platforms, and so on. What they're seeing in terms of returns, core business, investment, 10% returns, 20% returns for adjacent, and 70% returns for these. So if you take a look at the Amazon financial results, you basically see this all lay out. So advice there. Let's take those principles, now that we've gone through that framework well enough, let's take a look and apply that to an automotive company, in this case General Motors. So let's see what General Motors is doing in terms of innovating, and particularly involving local markets. So let's roll out the first canvas of this discussion, and let me turn it over to my good friend and colleague Javier Sevilla to explain this a little bit further. Javier.
Rick, antes que nada, muchas gracias por la invitación para poder platicar contigo en esta sesión. Y vayamos ahora precisamente a platicar cómo es que General Motors interactúa con diferentes ecosistemas. Principalmente en este caso vamos a hablar en Estados Unidos, para precisamente poder colaborar e interactuar con algunas startups. Y la idea es que aquí mostremos a través de una de las herramientas de nuestro partner noruego, Strategy Tools, cómo es que pueden precisamente dirigir discusiones y entender cómo es que esta colaboración con startups les puede ayudar precisamente pues, a mejorar o a innovar en alguna de estas 3 grandes áreas de portafolios de negocios, donde en este caso General Motors está precisamente compitiendo. Vamos a mostrarles algunos ejemplos de cómo es que esta interacción con startups les ayuda en lo que es su negocio core, cómo es que les ayuda precisamente a empezar a construir o explorar oportunidades en negocios adyacentes o bien en negocios que están más alejados de lo que es su negocio principal en este momento. Así que comencemos. En primer lugar, vamos a platicar cómo es que precisamente está colaborando con 2 startups para ayudarles a mejorar lo que es su negocio principal. Así que en este caso les estamos presentando 2 startups. En este caso, Seurad en lo que se enfoca es en la fabricación aditiva de metales 3D de grado industrial. Es decir, esta startup les va a ayudar precisamente a mejorar la calidad precisamente de la producción masiva de partes que necesitan precisamente para sus automóviles. Por otro lado, tenemos a Tula. Este es un startup que tiene base en Nueva York y lo que ellos han desarrollado es software para gestión del motor y lo que permite es tener una mayor eficiencia en el consumo del combustible. Ahora vayamos a la segunda arena que la conocemos como oportunidades adyacentes o de crecimiento, y aquí les vamos a hablar de esta otra startup. Ellos son SES y este startup tiene su base en Massachusetts y ellos se enfocan en desarrollo de tecnologías de baterías de litio, ¿ok? Ahora, esto es interesante para General Motors porque pues ellos definitivamente quieren convertirse en uno de los grandes jugadores en este campo. Y es interesante también que además de pues, diversos anuncios que están realizando en los últimos meses sobre inversiones en este campo, es que también hace pocos meses anunciaron que General Motors va a realizar una inversión de hasta alrededor de $1 billón en Coahuila, precisamente en una planta enfocada en la producción precisamente de este tipo de baterías. Y finalmente hablemos de esta tercera área, ¿sí? De esta tercera arena, que la conocemos como esta arena de negocios exploratorios, ¿sí? Que son estas oportunidades que están mucho más alejadas para General Motors de lo que es su core actual. Y aquí les queremos hablar de dos startups. Una de ellas se llama Nauto, y ellos se enfocan precisamente en desarrollar tecnología de inteligencia artificial para buscar generar precisamente o ayudar a tener en un futuro cercano autos autónomos. Ellos están basados en Silicon Valley. En segundo lugar, les quiero hablar precisamente de esta empresa que se llama AI, y ellos lo que realizan es que se han especializado en el desarrollo de sistemas LiDAR más inteligencia artificial, también enfocados precisamente para ayudar a la generación de estos autos autónomos y también ayudar a la parte de seguridad, proveyendo información adicional a los conductores. Así que, como ven, en este caso General Motors está colaborando con algunas startups en diferentes ecosistemas, precisamente con la idea de poder desarrollar o incorporar tecnología o innovaciones para ayudarle ya sea a su negocio core, a negocios adyacentes que están empezando a desarrollar y que tienen gran potencial de crecimiento, o hacia negocios que están mucho más alejados tal vez en este momento de lo que es su negocio principal, pero que definitivamente ven que tienen un alto potencial si es que algunas condiciones se van materializando. Y este es un pequeño ejemplo de cómo es que esta empresa, General Motors, precisamente está buscando este tipo de colaboraciones para ayudarlos a mejorar su negocio actual o para buscar precisamente crear este motor de crecimiento de su negocio del futuro. Pues regresamos contigo, Rick.
Thank you, Javier, for that really insightful look at General Motors and how they're going to go ahead and use and leverage some of the local resources to go ahead and innovate. So let's keep going. Second car company we're going to feature is Volkswagen. So Volkswagen itself has got a long job ahead of it. Of course, they've got a great legacy as a large automotive manufacturer that's been around for decades. Some of the most popular cars, largest manufacturer in Europe, but they've had some problems with their image and trying to move the company from their present state to future state. Overall, it's a huge corporation, over 600,000 employees, and they've got a visionary now in charge, which is Mr. Herbert Diess, Dr. Herbert Diess. And you can see here a couple of news articles where the VW chief defies skeptics with ambitious electric car plan, painting a vision for the future, up and against a lot of the embedded interests that are there to hold on to the existing corporation. As such, Volkswagen chief warns sacred cows need slaughtering. That is, let's move on from where we are and try to instill radical change that's needed to survive the industry upheaval. Innovate or die. He's sounding the alarm bells. Volkswagen needs to change from a collection of valuable brands to a digital company reliably operates millions of mobility devices worldwide. So a bunch of things embedded in that statement. First, the change from an automotive company to a mobility company. Second, using digital technologies as the driver to change and move the company that reliably operates and controls these mobility devices. So, how do you do that? Well, first off, you set some aspirational goals about, in this case, half of Volkswagen sales are expected to be battery electric vehicles by the end of this decade. To do that, investing 73 billion euros for the investment in future technologies just over the next 4 years. And he's having a bit of fun with it. You can be serious or you can poke the beast. And in this case, he invited Elon Musk to a talk on how Tesla innovates quickly. And Elon was there in name only, but you can see that he's being good-spirited about it and not painting a scary picture about the future, but living and enjoying it. But cars themselves, close to autonomy, they'll drive around autonomously, will have a high share of EV, mobility as a service, all these brand new business models as well. So here's a chance for open innovation. Open innovation means that you not only leverage the 600,000 employees that are working in Volkswagen, and you can do that to build yourselves, but there's the opportunity to go ahead and explore, scout and explore other companies that you can buy, ones that you can partner with, ones where you can co-invest in startups, or maybe even co-develop as part of an accelerator program, corporate venture capital, all the other tools of corporate innovation. So with that in mind, I'd like to bring back my colleague Javier, who will lead us through this particular canvas in the case of Volkswagen. Javier.
Muchas gracias, Rick. En este momento voy a presentarles algunos ejemplos de cuál es el enfoque de innovación de Volkswagen para buscar aprovechar algunas de estas oportunidades que empieza a vislumbrar y también para ver cómo es que considera que puede construir precisamente su propuesta de valor para aprovechar dichas oportunidades y, al fin de cuentas, pues buscar atraer clientes en este futuro cercano. Así que comencemos. En este caso les estamos presentando dos recientes adquisiciones de Volkswagen. Y Volkswagen tiene pues una historia de más de 10 adquisiciones recientemente. Así que en el caso, por ejemplo, de Gela Aglaya, ellos lo que hicieron es comprar la unidad de negocios de software de cámara. Y lo que buscan con esto es ayudar precisamente a contribuir a desarrollar el área de Volkswagen que tiene que ver con visión precisamente, pues con miras a construir este auto autónomo en un futuro cercano o mejorar precisamente a dar información para hacer más segura la conducción. Otra de las opciones que les vamos a platicar es cómo es que Volkswagen está buscando desarrollar asociaciones o alianzas. Y aquí nos vamos a enfocar en 3 puntos. Les compartimos que una de las opciones que utiliza el grupo tiene un área donde se llama Ideation Hub, que lo que buscan es presentar o plantear algunos retos o alguna problemática que ha identificado el grupo y lo sube a una plataforma donde terceros tienen acceso a estas problemáticas y pueden plantear soluciones. Y ya después Volkswagen las evalúa y si hay alguna que les interese, pues ya empiezan a explorar a más detalle en qué podría consistir esa solución y cómo es que podrían precisamente ayudar a desarrollarla. Y otra de las opciones que también las organizaciones utilizan es, por ejemplo, lanzar algunas unidades en algunas regiones o en algunos ecosistemas donde consideran que hay gran actividad que les puede ayudar precisamente a mejorar. En este caso, ellos lanzaron una iniciativa, un área que se llama Connect, que está basada en Tel Aviv, y ahí lo que buscan es precisamente pues, interactuar y aprovechar este floreciente y de gran empuje ecosistema que se ha desarrollado en Israel y buscar precisamente cómo es que pueden realizar scouting, después iniciar alguna colaboración o posiblemente inversión en alguna de estas startups. Otra de las opciones que típicamente se utilizan es el coinvertir en startups. Y aquí el grupo Volkswagen ha realizado más de 20 inversiones en diferentes startups. Aquí les presentamos solamente algunas de ellas y les voy a platicar, por ejemplo, que en el caso de Northvolt, esta es una empresa nórdica que se enfoca en el desarrollo, la fabricación de baterías de litio, ¿ok? Y, por ejemplo, en una de las últimas rondas de financiamiento que tuvieron, Northvolt levantó alrededor de 2.75 billones de dólares, de los cuales alrededor de 620 millones vienen de Volkswagen. Y con esto Volkswagen mantiene una propiedad de alrededor del 20% de esta startup. Y la lógica detrás de esta inversión masiva que se ha realizado en esta startup y en particular lo que ha ido aportando Volkswagen es asegurar que en el futuro cercano va a tener acceso para precisamente poder atender la demanda de su producción de autos eléctricos. Otra de las startups en las que he invertido, que también están en este mismo espacio de las baterías para los autos eléctricos, es Quantum Space. Esta startup, en lugar de utilizar tecnología de litio para las baterías, utiliza una tecnología de estado sólido. Otra de las startups que les estamos mostrando en las cuales ha invertido Volkswagen es IRP Systems. Y esta startup lo que desarrolla son sistemas de tren motriz eléctrico. Nuevamente, otro de los elementos que son necesarios precisamente para poder construir estos autos eléctricos. Y ahora vayamos a esta opción que es codesarrollar programas de aceleración. Y aquí Volkswagen tiene varias también opciones, varias iniciativas que ha lanzado. Por ejemplo, internamente tiene un incubador que se llama Future Mobility. Así que ahí pues pueden participar tanto áreas o grupos que vienen del propio grupo o ideas que surgen en el exterior y que ellos arropan precisamente para buscar incubar y después acelerar y desarrollar. O bien, también Volkswagen ha colaborado con algunas aceleradoras externas para desarrollar programas específicos o en conjunto con ellos, ¿ok? Aquí podemos ver, por ejemplo, lo que están desarrollando en APX, o también podemos ver esta iniciativa que se llama Startup Autobahn. Y aquí lo que están haciendo es un programa de aceleración en conjunto con Plug and Play. Plug and Play es una de las principales aceleradoras que hacen scouting, etcétera, a nivel mundial. Así que, como ven, a final de cuentas, pues las opciones que está explorando o que está utilizando Volkswagen para materializar lo que es su enfoque de innovación, pues son varias. Y en este caso nos hemos enfocado en platicarles de algunas de estas opciones de innovación abierta. Nuevamente, la idea es que las organizaciones pues tengan discusiones de cómo es que pueden precisamente explorar qué es lo que existe fuera de su empresa para innovar y para poder aprovechar las oportunidades que se están presentando en el mercado o las que se están comenzando a desarrollar y que seguramente se plasmarán en algunos años.
Javier, thank you so much. Again, really interesting. Let's take that the next step, though. You know, how do you find all these various partners and potential companies to source, work with, acquire, and so on? And so many of them are right there in your local ecosystem. So let's take a look at how you can collaborate with ecosystems. And I'll start with just one quick lesson, and that is here in Silicon Valley, we are often considered to be the leading innovation hub in the world. It's because there's a lot of important players across these various verticals of venture capital, investors of all types. We've got incubators and accelerators and research labs, universities, industry partners, technology leaders, startups, experts, and so on. And, you know, looking back 20, 30 years ago, it was really true that this place was the center of innovation and considered the apex of where anyone would go from around the world to go ahead and develop capabilities to innovate their products or services or launch new companies. So, but that's changed. I mean, the internet and communication and lessons and diaspora, and there's just a lot of reasons why all of these capabilities are now emerging in ecosystems, in locations around the world. Some, of course, like New York and London and Tokyo and China have been considered now to be up there at near par to what Silicon Valley has to offer. But that's also happening in regions around the world as well. So you have the ability to leverage a lot of these resources to go ahead and discover and find opportunities, to ideate, evaluate, to build proof of concepts, to build out scale, and so on. So this whole idea of identifying resources within your ecosystem and finding ways to leverage, grow, and scale fast. Super important. So let's introduce you to the last tool that we're going to talk about during this talk, which is our ecosystem map. We'll go through what a local ecosystem looks like, how to identify the players, and then from that, identify the people that you could potentially work with. So, for one last time, Javier, please, if you will.
Muchas gracias, Rick. Ahora vamos a platicar cómo es que las organizaciones pueden entender el ecosistema o los ecosistemas que sean de su interés. Porque muchas veces una de las primeras preguntas para una organización que quiere comenzar precisamente a buscar explorar este tema de la innovación abierta es ¿cómo inicio? Así que este es un gran primer paso para entender precisamente cómo colaborar o interactuar con algún ecosistema. Y aquí nos vamos a enfocar en lo que es el ecosistema, pues podemos pensar regional aquí en Jalisco, o también lo podemos extrapolar a lo que sería México. Y aquí uno de los elementos que podemos utilizar para comenzar a explorar un ecosistema es conocer quiénes son las incubadoras o aceleradoras que existen en nuestra región. Y aquí podemos pensar desde aceleradoras o incubadoras locales que surgieron de México o de alguna región, o podemos también pensar cómo interactuar con algunas de las aceleradoras que son globales o regionales y que tienen alguna sede en nuestro país. Así que aquí podemos hablar de Startup México, Mass Challenge, Seed Stars, Village Capital, solamente por mencionar algunas de ellas. Y lo interesante con ellas es que podemos precisamente tener una primera interacción y conocer pues quiénes han participado precisamente de sus programas de incubación o aceleración y descubrir qué es lo que podríamos aprovechar en nuestra empresa. Otra opción es interactuar con inversionistas, ¿sí? Nuevamente, para conocer tal vez su portafolio de inversión, pueden ser empresas que estén enfocadas en las etapas iniciales de inversión. Y por qué no, explorar si podemos ser o si les interesa, pues inclusive invertir precisamente a través precisamente de estas empresas. Pues en este caso podemos pensar en México. Carabela es una de estas empresas que se dedica precisamente a estas etapas tempranas. Y en esta área de Venture Capital, pues estamos hablando de organizaciones de inversionistas que son ya profesionales definitivamente y que también pues están enfocadas no solamente en la etapa semilla, sino en las siguientes etapas de inversión. Ejemplos, tenemos Angel Ventures, que está también aquí en Jalisco, en Guadalajara. Otros son 500 Startups, que es una empresa global. Tenemos también a Nazca, tenemos a Redwood, tenemos a Dux Capital. Tenemos varias empresas que se han dedicado precisamente a financiar etapas iniciales de startups de México y de Latinoamérica. Por otro lado, también podemos explorar pues, los premios, algunos programas que existen en el ecosistema o en la región en la que estamos. En el caso de Jalisco, pues puede ser interesante acercarnos con la Secretaría de Innovación, Ciencia y Tecnología o con el CUETSITJAL o con alguna otra institución. Algo también interesante es acercarnos con asociaciones. Y en particular nosotros queremos plantearles que algo interesante también es colaborar o acercarse con clústeres. En México tenemos más de 100 clústeres. Hay algunos clústeres que están en nuestra región, en Jalisco, otros en el norte, en el centro, ¿sí? En varias regiones en México. Por ejemplo, algo interesante, uno de los clústeres interesantes que tenemos en nuestra región, en nuestro estado, es el IJALTI. ¿Sí? Aquí ellos también están realizando un trabajo interesante para comenzar a interactuar con un grupo de startups. Otro de los clústeres que fue quien nos hizo el favor de extenderlos la invitación para participar en este evento de Canieti es el clúster industrial 4.0 de aquí Jalisco también. Así que hay más opciones, hay asociaciones, la misma Canieti obviamente también es una asociación muy interesante para entender qué es lo que está pasando en algún ecosistema. Una opción más es también, obviamente, explorar, pues, quiénes o qué organizaciones están realizando tal vez servicios de coaching o consultoría, ya sea en temas de innovación o en temas de startups. Así que también pueden ser estas organizaciones un punto de entrada interesante para conocer lo que sucede en este ecosistema o en algún ecosistema que a ustedes les interese en particular. Pueden utilizar esta herramienta para que ustedes con su equipo realicen precisamente una discusión y un análisis de cómo es que se mueve alguno de los ecosistemas que podrían ser de su interés. De vuelta contigo, Rick.
Thank you, Javier. We've learned so much from you and love to hear you speak about all the various things that have to do with building out your innovation capabilities. So, with that in mind, all good things must come to an end. So let's go ahead and draw some conclusions from our talk today. So as we've seen, innovation is the driver to long-term success in your industry. Innovate or die, the pace of innovation is going so quick that you need to be able to stay on the bandwagon in order to be a successful company for the short, medium, and long term. Innovation can take place in various stages in multiple places within your company. You can do core innovation on your existing business, find some adjacencies, new customers, new products or services to go ahead and find some growth opportunities. And lastly, to start to think about some ways to explore, to extend your company to new horizons and potentially succeed out there in the future. Now, in doing so, you can leverage innovation partnerships. You can go ahead and build out your internal capability. You can take a look at buying and acquiring new companies. You partner up with companies, co-invest in new opportunities, or even co-develop using tools like accelerators and corporate venture capital and so on. And lastly, in doing so, it's in your best interest to understand and manage the opportunities within your own ecosystem. And I'm here to say, and we're all here to say, that Mexico's innovation ecosystem is robust and growing, and we invite you to go ahead and learn more and leverage what's there. And in doing so, understand and build out your innovation strategy. So thank you so much for listening today. I hope you learned a few things along the way, and we hope to see you all soon. Bye now.